History books often credit Vasco da Gama with discovering India in 1498, but the subcontinent was already the center of the global economy long before a single Portuguese ship appeared on the horizon. Thousands of years before European ships ever dared to cross the open ocean, India was home to highly organized urban civilizations. These societies operated with complex written scripts, standardized weights, and advanced city planning. By the Middle Ages, this region was the undisputed engine of global trade. The detailed craftsmanship found in their art reflects a society overflowing with material wealth, exporting coveted spices, silk, and precious gems to every corner of the map. India exerted a massive gravitational pull on global trade, acting as a brilliant economic sun the rest of the world spent centuries trying to reach. Meanwhile, 15th century Europe struggled through freezing winters with scarce resources, often forced to survive on bland, heavily salted, or rotting meat. To make that food edible and preserve it through the long, dark months, Europeans required a biological necessity. They needed pepper, cloves, and cinnamon to keep their food supplies from spoiling. This map illustrates the era's geopolitical crisis. The land routes to the east were completely controlled by the Ottoman Empire and Arab merchants. They placed a total blockade on European traders, establishing a strict monopoly and charging high prices for access to the east. With the land routes sealed shut, European monarchs faced a terrifying reality. To bypass the Arab monopoly and access the world's wealth, they had to sail into the unmapped, deadly oceans. The Portuguese king chose Vasco da Gama for this mission, specifically because of his reputation for ruthlessness. He was an obsessive, volatile navigator, willing to push a crow into the oceanic abyss. In the summer of 1497, da Gama's fleet sailed into the open Atlantic. They navigated blindly by the stars while facing violent storms. 10-story waves crashed over the decks, shredding their wooden ships and canvas sails. Inside the ships, the conditions were a biological nightmare. Without fresh food, scurvy dissolved the sailors' gums, their teeth rotted and fell out, and daily routines included tying heavy stones to dead crewmates and tossing them into the sea. Broken by terror and disease, the surviving crew mutinied and begged to turn back. Da Gama responded by drawing his sword and throwing the fleet's navigational instruments directly into the ocean. He removed any possibility of returning home. Survival now relied entirely on a fanatical, suicidal obsession to reach the eastern shores or die in the attempt. The battered fleet eventually managed to cross the southernmost tip of Africa. This was the Cape of Storms, a stretch of water that had already claimed hundreds of European ships. They moved up the eastern coast of Africa, finally dropping anchor at the trading port of Malindi. Here, staring out at the vast Indian Ocean, the Portuguese realized they were out of their depth in an environment they did not understand. Da Gama's success actually relied on local expertise. He recruited an eastern navigator who understood the complex monsoon wind patterns and celestial maps of the Indian Ocean, knowledge European sailors lacked. Europe's arrival was only made possible by tapping into a pre-existing maritime network operating for centuries. On May 20, 1498, the Portuguese fleet smelled sandalwood and spices in the air. The fog cleared to reveal Calicut, a cosmopolitan metropolis overflowing with global merchants and immense wealth. The cultural clash was stark. King Zamarin of Calicut sat in a grand court adorned in heavy gold chains and diamonds. Standing before him was Vasco da Gama, unwashed, wearing ragged clothes, and offering pathetic gifts of cheap brass vessels and honey. This chart shows the financial return of the expedition. Even after accounting for the high operational costs and lost ships, the single payload of spices da Gama brought back to Lisbon yielded 64 times pure profit. This massive profit margin shifted the world's axis, turning a simple trade route into a blueprint for global domination. A devastating chain reaction followed. The Portuguese were soon trailed by the Dutch, the French, and eventually the British. They arrived as traders, but quickly returned as heavily armed conquerors. Small trading posts mutated into military strongholds. The East India Company and other imperial powers initiated a centuries-long era of exploitation, war, and the systematic draining of the subcontinent's raw resources. Colonialism looted the physical wealth of the land, yet the core civilizational identity of India remained unbroken through generations of oppression. On August 15, 1947, the nation shattered those colonial chains and fully reclaimed its sovereignty. The 1947 Declaration of Independence confirmed that while foreign powers could temporarily occupy the land, the underlying civilization remained an unbroken, sovereign force. India was never discovered, it was simply reclaimed by its own people.